Hello, booktube people and book lovers everywhere, and hopefully some writerly people out there, people who like to occasionally pick up a pen and write in a notebook or maybe type on your computer. I'm more the kind that likes to write with a pen on paper. Now, I will have you know that wonderful book, East of Eden, which I know many of you are reading this summer, that book by John Steinbeck was written on paper with a pencil. The entire thing, that was John Steinbeck's preferred method of writing, and you can read all about it because he did publish all of his journal entries from that period of his life so that we could find out what it was like for him to be writing a novel. That was an interesting book, right? So I thought today there's several things I could talk about, and the inspiration I got, a lot of times I have to go with inspiration because I don't know. There's just so many things I could talk about. I need to be focused on one thing. And the inspiration I got for today was NaNoWriMo. A lot of you have done the NaNoWriMo thing. I know you have either attempted to write a novel or did write a novel during NaNoWriMo. And congratulations, everyone who has done this thing. Now, I first found out about NaNoWriMo about a year after it started. The first year was the year 2000, and the year I first participated was 2001. And I actually just got on my computer and tried to reconstruct what I had written in each year. Memory fails me after a while. Like, this goes back to 2001. I made a little list of all the novels that I wrote, and the year in which I did that. So I'm going to sort of describe the novels. I'm not going to tell you the titles of the novels because these are all unpublished. And I'll tell you why, because I'm going to make some comments about NaNoWriMo, of course, before I'm done with this video. So the first novel that I wrote was 2001. I had never written a novel before of any kind and never tried. Well, no, I did try to. I had at least two other earlier attempts that were total failures, and I could describe them. No, three. I think there was three earlier total failures. So I always wanted to write a novel. When I found out about NaNoWriMo, I thought this is a good opportunity because it puts a little pressure on me to get it done fast, and to just, you have the pressure to get the whole 50,000 words on paper before the end of the month of November. So, National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo, really appealed to me. So in 2001, I wrote a story. As I told you in the last video, I had some index cards. I love index cards. So on some of them, okay, I had four different places, locations, and I chose one of them at random, and it turned out to be the location I was going to write about was in the forest where I now live. I live in a forest in Northern California. So I had another set of four index cards with four different time periods, and I'm pretty sure they were like 100 years ago because I really like the pioneer type era. And of course, one of the time periods possible was now, one was in the future, and one was in the far distant past. So I chose the far distant past rather randomly. And I'm very happy I did choose that because one thing I knew for NaNoWriMo was not to write something that was provable, like historical fiction. You have to have your dates right. You have to have some knowledge of the historical period that you're writing about. You have to have know exactly what things to include in what time period. So historical fiction was not a good fit for me because I was not that organized or ready or prepared. I just did my random drawings just like about a day or two, maybe at the most, before NaNoWriMo started, and I didn't have time to research historical details, and so I wasn't going to do that. It was going to be more of a fantasy sort of fiction thing, and I started out because I had heard that, okay, I wanted to write a middle grade novel, and I had heard that girls, young girls, will read either girls or boys' books. In other words, they will read a book with either a girl or a boy protagonist. But boys will only read a book with a boy protagonist, usually. I mean, there are exceptions to every rule, but for the most part, boys prefer to read books that have boy protagonists, and girls don't care who the protagonist is, they just like to read books. So I was going to have a boy protagonist. That book has never been published. It has been revised 6 times at the very least. Critique group partners have gone over it with me. I do not want to have anything published that is not ready for publication. And so it was very important to me to get it all right and to learn my craft before I do anything like go get something self-published with a lot of typos in it, as some people do. So the second book, the second year was 2002, and it ended up being a continuation of the first novel. One of the characters in the first novel was a girl, and I made her the main character in the second novel. So now I've got a novel and a sequel. The sad thing is that the second novel has never been edited properly. I've gone over it maybe once, maybe 1.5 times. I'm nowhere near ready for that one to be published. So the third year, 2003, I wanted to write some more, of course. I was really enjoying the writing of novels and the good feelings that it gave me. And so I wrote a book about the area in which I live in the not very distant past. Now, where I live, there used to be a lumber mill, and a lot of people who used to live in this community lived because of usually the father was working in the lumber mill. But then the lumber mill was put out of business because of activists and environmentalists, and so all those people had to move away for just to be able to make money. And I actually moved into this community because they moved away. Suddenly there was a lot of empty housing, and I was able to live in one of the houses that used to be lived in by one of these productive lumber business people. So I decided to write a book about a family that was impacted by this dilemma in our community. And I don't know if that one will ever be published. I had just read East of Eden, and I was really impressed by the format that he used for writing that novel. He had each chapter divided into 4 sections, as I recall it, and I just copied him completely as far as the format. And I have never even reread that novel. I reread the first chapter and it bored me. And so I wasn't so sure I wanted to keep reading. And I don't know if that one will ever be published. So interesting fact, though, was that I was into a group of people that were writing really fast. And so instead of writing just 50,000 words, we wrote over 100,000 words during the month of November. And I was kind of excited about that. And I actually did it again the next year. I wrote another novel set in the 1960s. And that novel, I believe, has over 100,000 words that I wrote during the month of November in 2004. So after that, I never wrote double NaNoWriMo again. I only wrote single NaNoWriMos after that. So the next year, 2005, I wrote a book about somebody living in this community as a Forest Service employee and exploring the Marble Mountains and things like that. And it got kind of wild toward the end, but that novel actually was never even finished. And I don't know how many words it ended up being. So I do have copies of all these novels on my hard drive still. So the next year, 2006, I went back to my original group of people, the young people, middle grade novel people living in a very ancient civilization. So I had the 2001, 2002, 2006, and 2007 NaNoWriMo novels were about these group of kids. Um, and then the next year was 2008, and I wrote a memoir. Now, I know it's National Novel Writing Month and doesn't say anything about memoirs there, but I realized a lot of people in the group were writing memoirs, and I decided to give it a try. And I got 50,000 words, but I don't think I even got into my teenage years. I just had a lot to write about my childhood, I guess, and I never finished that. And so the last time I attempted NaNoWriMo, I was writing a book about a female Bigfoot. And I really had a lot of fun writing that, but I did not even finish it. It needs at least another 2 or 3 chapters. After I wrote the first novel in 2001, I knew I was supposed to wait a couple months to let the novel sit there while I detached from it a little bit so that I could revise it with fresh eyes. And I never actually did revise it after 2 months. In fact, I let it sit for at least 6 months, or was it a year and a half before I was brave enough to try to revise it. And I found the revising to be very challenging. The novel writing itself was such a creative endeavor. I really enjoyed doing it. And the revising was kind of a drag for me. So this week I was reading in this book, A Writer's Book of Days, and in the June chapter there is a little article about revising, and I was very impressed by something that she wrote in here. It's a quotation. She was quoting Bernard Malamud, and he called revising one of the exquisite pleasures of writing, and how I would love to have that attitude. I would love to be in love with revision. And so far I'm not, but who knows? There's still room for loving revision in my future. I guess as long as you're still here, you still have something to do in life in general. So there's my story about NaNoWriMo and why my novels are not published. Well, like the first one that I wrote was probably publishable, but I'm glad I didn't have it published right away because I wrote 3 sequels to that novel, and it has occurred to me that I would really like to have them published all at one time. And part of the reason is because I really do not like series books. It's like they want you to buy the first book, and then you like that so much you want to go on with the series. Great, buy another book. Buy another book. So you end up being fleeced for 4 or 5 books, $50, $100, who knows, for one series. And I just don't think it's right or fair, and I don't want to go there, and I'm going to self-publish anyhow. So my self-publishing prices are not very high. In any case, I'm thinking very seriously of publishing them all under one title and just making it 4 parts of one book. So that's where I am with that series, and I think it is a good idea, but I would have to have all 4 of those novels completely edited and ready before I could publish it as a book, and that's not happening yet. Thank you so much for coming here and listening to my story about my writing history insofar as NaNoWriMo is concerned. And I would love to know about your writing history. If you would like to write me something about your writing history, either in the comments of this video or make your own writing video, that would be fantastic. I would love to see it. And I will get back to you another Wednesday with more writing information. I was going to add a story. I want to read a story that I recently wrote. It's kind of random. It's first draft, and I thought that would be fun for every video, like I used to do it in 2018. But this video is long enough already, and I'm just going to call it quits here. And just thank you so much for coming and listening. Thank you very much.